Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing you insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide you with an actionable perspective on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, your companion through the ever-evolving landscape of law practice management. Each episode, you're going to hear our guests about their superpowers and how they've reached success and how they define it. Today, I'm really excited because I have Patrick Wright. He's the managing partner of the Wright Firm, LLP, a law firm located in Texas with 4 locations: Dallas, Frisco, Louisville, and Denton, Texas. So a fellow Texan. And what's really cool is that Patrick and I have met through our involvement with the ABA Law Practice Division and are now currently serving on the ABA Tech Show board. And so he's has a lot of different leadership roles that he'll let us know a little bit more about it, but he is the managing partner of his firm and practices family law, focusing on complex child custody and property cases. And he's board certified in family law with the State Bar of Texas. And it sounds like he's a little bit of everywhere. So we'll hear more about him. We want to talk a lot about AI and tech in general, and just sort of what we're doing at what he's doing in his practice. So Patrick, welcome. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Ruby. I admire of you, and that is true. We've spent some time together, both with ABA and also state bar functions with Texas, and so very happy to be on your show.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we were most recently in Omaha, Nebraska, of all places, and then we bumped into each other at the State Bar of Texas annual meeting in Dallas, where you and I both were speaking on the law practice track that day, and I was talking about staffing, and you were talking about AI and tech, and it was a great program. So, what got you into being so much into this technology and AI space?
Wow, I mean, what a great question. You know, I started years ago when I opened up a law firm, and you know, as every sort of small firm owner does, I mean, you have to wear a lot of hats, and so I probably my entry point was probably back in the 90s with doing marketing. And so and you know, in those days, you know, sort of the tech aspect of it was trying to figure out, you know, the then Google, you know, search algorithm and setting up websites and, you know, seeing how many places you could dominate. I mean, the thought of it, you know, way back when of the, you know, we had the 10 pack then. Now, I mean, it's changed so much with maps and everything else right now that I think at one point in time I had 9 places out of 10 for my local market, which would just be impossible to do today. So that was sort of the vector that got me into sort of the tech space, and then I've just morphed since then into other areas of technology and sort of how they apply to running a firm and also the practice of law.
And so you've had your firm for how many years now?
It's been 20 years now.
Wow. Okay. And so your practice areas, I know we mentioned family, but what are the other areas you have?
Well, and goodness, I can tell you that over the years, we've done a few, some very successfully and some not very successfully. but I mean, we have been in areas, we've done a family forever. And so, and when I say family, we do hourly and also flat fee practice. And then in addition to that, we'll do a CPS practice. So I not only have my board certification in family law, but I also have my board certification in child welfare. And so we'll do some CPS work too. And then in addition, estate planning, probate, we've done some criminal in the past, done some personal injury in the past. We had a bankruptcy practice before COVID. And so we've done a lot of different areas, but right now we just focus on family law and estate and probate.
And we, reading your bio, realized that we're serving on a lot of the same, have in the committees where you are on the ABA's Law Practice Division editorial board for the Law Practice magazine and the Lawyer Leadership Committee. How did you get started with ABA in general? And for those who don't know what the law practice division is? Like, how would you describe sort of what the law practice division does?
I think the law practice division with ABA is a great resource for small firm owners because it encompasses all those areas from marketing to billing to ethics to how you run your practice. I mean, pretty much it's the gambit of just firm ownership and running a firm. I got into it because I was interested in just sort of trying to figure out how to better work my firm. I joke about being a lawyer because it's always the practice of law. We're always practicing, we're never perfection. But so I wanted to be around like-minded lawyers who wanted to grow and expand their firm. And so I thought, you probably have found this on a state level. It's kind of interesting how, people on the state level view the ABA. It's sort of like a different animal. And so I went to an ABA meeting, really liked the folks there, had a lot of great people that I met, and decided I want to get involved. And so sort of the way back there was on the editorial board of Law Practice Magazine. I'm not on that right now because I got off that when I got on to ABA Tech Show last year, but so did that for a number of years, was an editor on many different magazines, wrote for the magazine itself. And so that's sort of how I got involved with ABA. But, for people who are interested and want to learn about the practice and some really great subject matter experts, I've really enjoyed my time with the ABA, and it's a fantastic resource.
Yeah. And I got in it because I had done a lot of work with the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and my mentors, Reed Trouts and Charity Anastasio, were both involved with ABA Law Practice Division. And so they say, hey, why don't you check it out? And so I think it's been 3 years ago when I first went to my first meeting. And then I got roped in really quickly. So, and then usually you have to be involved for a little while before they trust you to be on the ABA Tech Show board. So, and you've been on that a couple of times, or not more.
This is my second year to be on ABA Tech Show board. And that too was another one of those things for people that just get involved. It's not like you're 100% correct. It's not like that, I said, ooh, I want to be on that. Although I will say, in fairness, that, having gone to a couple of ABA Tech shows, it's one of those things that you go once and you're like, this is like where all the cool people are. So you want to go and hang out and be around there. So I had been exposed to it a bunch of times before and really loved the experience of that conference. And so I just got a phone call out of blue, and someone called and said, hey, we're, would you be interested in being on this board? And I'm like, oh my God, absolutely. 100% I'm in. And so, again, great experience. And of course I'm back for 2025. So I really enjoy it and happy to be back.
Yeah, and it's exciting because at the time of this recording, we're still pulling in a couple of proposals for speakers, and that's how we build the content. I'm having fun being a newbie on the board, learning how the sausage is made, if you will, and then we're going to take a look at but every year can change as to what the hot topic is and what the theme is, and we're going to be celebrating the 40-year anniversary, April 2nd to 5th, 2025 at the McCormick in Chicago. And the board meets multiple times, like in person mostly, and some Zoom. And we're going to be meeting and trying to curate the best proposals and make that programming available. And there's so many changes happening. It's sort of like hard because we're talking about this here in the summer, but we won't be meeting until April. But that's why we have to have good speakers who can sort of like adapt and create that update the programming as we progress.
Yeah, 100% right too, where I was looking, and if the counter clock's right, we're about 260 days out from that conference. And so always interesting, and you're right, because we had, because yesterday was one of the deadlines for people to get papers in. And last I checked, we're at 260 plus on people who had submitted proposals for speaking. So Ruby, you and I have our job cut out for us to go through all those presentations that people are trying to submit, I guess at the end of August when we're going to do that. yeah, I mean, there is a huge interest in it. It's an amazing show. And if people haven't been there, we changed the date. So a lot of times people were worried about going to the show in February, and they're like, oh no, Chicago in February, Lake Michigan's pretty cold, but we changed the date. And so, as you said, it is in April. It's McCormick Place. It's a new venue. I always joke about the show, and then there's the show. So there is incredible speaking opportunities and CLE at the show. I mean, the CLE is really top notch, and the presentations that you get. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier because we're playing another conference, and we were talking about the Copilot for AI, the Copilot presentation last year. And, who would have, because that was so early on, who would have known that would become, as popular as it was? But you could tell from the conference, standing room only in that room. And I think Ben Shore did an amazing job on the speech. And so, but now a lot of great speakers still. And then what I say about the other show is, it's just the attendees being able to hang out, like I said, with the cool kids. And then the next thing is the vendors. Because people don't really talk about the vendors, but I mean, Ruby, there's like over 100 vendors at this show, with everything, every type of product, software, like practice management software, billing software, sometimes hardware. There's just a lot to see and do.
Yeah, there's so much. And in fact, like that's when I first went in 2019, that was one of my big eye openers. Just I saw more vendors I'd ever seen at any other conference I'd ever attended. And that's like, I get a good way for those who have never attended or just are like trying to get inspired to make sure you put this on your calendar is it's part like expo hall trade show, and then part CLE, and then part like all the crazy networking that happens from having those breaks in between the CLEs, the trips to the expo hall. Ideas are sparked, companies are made, and there's the startup alley the opening night, and they all get a little booth and get to talk with them, and it's fun to watch those startup alley participants, because usually they become these rising stars as the years progress, and to watch chart their journeys as well. And I've had some of those folks on the podcast. But
I'll tell you, Ruby, my favorite thing was at this last one. I did not plan it, but it just sort of happened. Was doing 60 and 60, and so so I was like, oh, I got to do 60 and 60, and for those people who don't go, we do 60 tech tips in 60 minutes. It's really rapid fire. There's a lot of cool things. And so that was literally, I mean, I like look at that going, wow, I'm so happy and blessed to be able to do that, because that's always been something that I thought's really cool and fun. And so I was happy to be able to participate in it. But another thing that has been a really popular segment of that show too is just the latest and up-to-date and new technology that people can implement in their practice.
Yeah, I think a lot about the Rogers innovation adoption curve. And I think about the innovators and the early adopters are really who are the ones that attend this. And things that, like, I learned about Otter AI 2 years ago, and then now there's a few competitors and everything, all that. But I was using it back then because I learned it at ABA Tech Show. So it's like the who's living in this space is there, and we all share great ideas. So speaking of that, like, let's assume the audience is sort of in the intermediate space, not a beginner on AI and tech. Like, what do you think are the conversations that are happening right now and things that we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so I think with the AI space, I relate to the fact that I guess now it's about a month ago, I went to West Virginia, and I was speaking in West Virginia to their family law lawyers there about AI. And so I asked everyone in this group, I mean, Ruby and I are, for those listening, Ruby and I are used to going to these conferences in Texas where there's like, 1,200 people there. I mean, so I was in West Virginia. It's a small pack room. There's like 150 people there. And so I asked them all sort of, how many of y'all are using AI in your practice, daily? And the first question was, how many of y'all are familiar with it? Maybe like 3 hands went up. I asked them, how many are using it in your practice daily? And of like about 150 people, maybe 2 hands went up. And And of those two hands, one of them was a judge. All right. And
Oh,
so,
okay.
yes. And so, and I'm going to tell you a story about that if you let me real quick after I, hit on what the topics are. But so what I think is important for people to know initially is we're at the early adoption stage. We're at the early iPhone. We're at internet when we're using dial up. We're at a really early stage in the life cycle of this technology. And so a lot of people are afraid of it. We saw the Schwartz case where the lawyer, didn't read his brief and he got in trouble. And so, there was a recent state bar poll that's come out, and it was sort of premiered at annual, but meeting. And in that poll, one of the takeaways was that only 5% of lawyers really thought that they weren't afraid of it. And when I was in West Virginia, and I'm not joking, it's very timely, that the West Virginia Record, the newspaper for that town, had an article about lawyers and technology, like right before I went, and it was like lawyers are, the most afraid of technology of any profession, and I find that true. So what I say to folks is, you can use it for stuff other than law. And so this nice little lady lawyer came up to me at the conference, not in it, but afterwards. And she said, I'm just afraid of it. What do you think? And I said to her, do you cook? And she goes, yeah, why? And I said, do you use recipes? And she says, yes, why? And I said, you can use it to do recipes, right? She goes, really? I'm like, yes. She goes, I'm going to try it. I go, do you travel? She says, yes, I travel. I said, you can use it to do great travel itineraries and trip planning. You understand that? So what I would suggest to people is use it for, if you're afraid about it, use it for something other than law, and then you'll kind of wade into the pool and you'll figure out why this isn't really scary. And I can use it and it's not hard. I'll tell you this, Ruby. One of the main questions I get, and it's kind of funny, which is, where is it? And so I've had numerous lawyers at conferences come up to me and say, where do I find this AI? And so, but yeah, so I think people's fear about it, I think people's reluctance because it's a new technology, and just, some people don't even know where it is.
I agree. And I was speaking to a smaller town outside of Houston. Was that this week? I think, I don't know, I've lost track, but basically on AI and tech. And I realized that's why I usually say, how many of you use ChatGPT as just a barometer of like, where are we at in the room? And like what you did as well, similar. And what I realized is part of the conversation I think should be for some people is just make a list of your tech stack and check to see you're using it fully. Because we had Barron from the ABA Tech Show board on recently, and one of his things I completely wholeheartedly agree is we're all underutilizing our tech stack. And I think first we should analyze, we should get to know what's AIs out there. But a lot of times people are using that as a buzzword and just throwing AI here and there. But really it is a great tool, and I use it every day. And I agree with, I say the exact same thing as you. Try it in like administrative or personal things first, get the paid version of something, get to dabble it, get more comfortable, and then you train your brain. Just like, and like what I said towards the end of my speech recently was like, if you're avoiding this, it's like you're one of those, like you were saying, you're sort of avoiding the advent of the internet or the advent of email or something like that. And like, where do you think you're going to go? There's those innovators and early adopters who are going to be ahead because it's already been out for almost 2 years, this in just a couple of months. So.
Yeah. And I'll say this about this, which is about it's been out. So the version that we all commonly sort of refer to has been out since November of 2022. AI's been working whether we realize it or not for a long time, which, right. I know that that, Ruby. If anyone who buys anything on Amazon who wonders, sort of, why does this thing keep popping up in my deal? AI's been there. It's just now at a level and a functionality where it's for the masses. And I think it's, there was a story recently at the Apple conference that just happened fairly recently where, it's being incorporated into all the iPhones. And so, that's the reason why I sort of jokingly said it's AI for the masses, because, in, which you have to be careful about this too, because, I don't think it's as good as some people are hyping it up for what it's worth. Meaning, I've heard some people say that you can, drive and pull over the side of the road and whip out this document. And, I don't think it's that good. Right. But I think that it is a tool, and we all need to sort of, as our model rules and our ethical rules, rule 1 with ABA and in Texas, as far as understanding the use of technology and how technology is changing. I mean, that's something that we should know anyway. I mean, it's sort of like the Fifth Circuit was just asked about this recently, and the Fifth Circuit said essentially same rules apply. You need to read and look at what you send to us before you send to us. And so I kind of laugh about that, saying, okay, basically the same rules. Yes, the same rules. And so but go ahead.
No, well, go ahead and finish. Go ahead and finish that. Yeah.
And so I think that just in general, it's not a pass to say just use it. I mean, you've got to learn the technology. You got to learn how to use it. You got to figure out whether it's training on your data or not. Meaning, are they using what you're putting in there to train their model or not? You got to know how to turn that off with the selections, so it's not training on your data. And then one of the other things I always tell people too is, it keeps that running log ChatGPT does on the side, which is essentially like your history. And so you need to be cautious of that too, because as I've explained to people are like, well, I turned everything off. It's not training my data. I'm safe on that. And I'm like, but have you deleted your history? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, are you aware of the case where people's passwords were hacked in India and their accounts were stolen? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yes. So just make sure you're deleting your history too, so that that's not in there. But it's just, that shouldn't be a reason not to use it. And then I'll sort of, add this too. It's going to be in every technology, whether you want it or not. All right. I mean, it is in Adobe, it is in Zoom right now. It is like literally you can take almost every product that you're looking at. I was talking to the people with DocuSign, and they were telling me about their AI product that they've just rolled out, literally a storage place on their platform for contracts to be able to get the contractual language and that sort of thing. And so, it's going to be in like everything. So why not sort of wade in the pool, start working it and figuring it out, and then you'll be ahead of the curve.
So, what are some practical examples, speaking of that you're using for?
Yeah. So in the early days, I did a lot of like really crazy stuff. Now, my tip to everyone is just be creative. Right. And so people are going to think, oh my God, he's got like way too much free time. But I, there's think about this. I was thinking about this the other day. If we look at meditations, Marcus Aurelius, Stoic, right? So Marcus Aurelius meditations, that wasn't for everyone else. That wasn't for you or I. It wasn't supposed to be published. Those were Marcus Aurelius's notes, where he was going around keeping things that he thought were important for his life, right? So all of that, everything is in AI, in the database, or at least everything they've scanned, right? So Marcus Aurelius was sort of the early adopter of data and information. And so all of that is in the AI product. Now think about this. So if you wanted to speak to a historical figure, right? So one of the early adoptions and uses was, I looked at it and I said, I want to learn more about the Civil War, but I want Abraham Lincoln to teach me about it. All right. So I had to assume the role of Abraham Lincoln and talking about the Civil War. All right. So I've had it do all kinds of crazy stuff, from fortune reading to travel planning. I'm serious. So I looked at the early adopters now. I was like, what industries are really going to be affected by this AI product? And one of the things that I saw was fortune telling was really gonna be hit. All right. And so now, but what your listeners are going to know is, okay, great, Patrick. So, you've told us that we can talk about history and all that stuff. How am I supposed to use this for the practice of law? Right. So responding to emails, it's amazing. All right. Drafting letters to opposing counsel, amazing. Doing grammar checking, spelling checking. It's fabulous. I will say the difference between it and Grammarly is it's not going to redline your document. So you just need to understand that, right? Translation. I had a case where we have counsel in Japan, and I took my English language document and I converted it to Japanese. And my client looked at it and said, "This looks fine." I sent it, because he speaks Japanese. I sent it to the counsel in Japan, right? I have used it to do citation check, blue book form, green book form. Basically do it. I had an appellate brief that I was using, and I needed to do a summary of the argument for the summary of the argument section. And so I've done affidavits. I think probably just because I'm rolling, one of the things that I thought was really interesting was we had a client who gave us screenshots of text messages. And so, yeah, these weren't the actual text messages. These were photos of the text messages. And I gave it to my legal assistant, and my legal assistant was sort of like, "Oh my gosh, I've got like 20 screenshots. You want me to type all this stuff in?" And I thought, no, I don't want you to do that at all. So I put, because I needed an affidavit, I took those photos, uploaded them into GTP, and then had GTP craft an affidavit by just reading the contents of the photos. And it was extremely good.
Oh,
and so,
wow. That's awesome.
So there are a lot of creative use programs that you can use for it. And it literally responding to reviews. I mean, not just necessarily using your practice. You can use it for if someone reviews you and you want to respond to it. You can use that. You can use it to generate content for your website. I mean, there's just lots of different use cases for it.
Yeah, you can have it summarize like a longer article and get you the bullet points, and even translate. Like, for example, if I have an asylum statement for a consultation, I can translate it into English and then summarize it really quickly. Of course, if I'm like in a paid or closed safe version of it, obviously. But I think that's where a lot of people are, they're like afraid, I'm going to wait until somebody gives me the green light. But like you said, the circuit, other places are like, just use caution, due diligence, read the fine print, that you double check things. This isn't going to go away.
People are afraid because they say, "Oh, it's going to hallucinate," right? It's going to.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's the way it's designed to hallucinate. So people just need to understand that that's what it's supposed to do. But we hallucinate too, by the way. I mean, if I say Mary has a little, you're going to add on lamb. So you're adding that in there, right? And so if people say, "Oh, it doesn't get things right," well, just look at the study of live eyewitnesses for human beings that are trying to pick people out of a lineup, or they're trying to testify in court, and the number of convictions that have been overturned by people who basically got it wrong. And so even as human beings, it's designed to mimic the brain. And so, even as human beings, we get it wrong. So we go fact check, we go read our legal assistant's writings, we go make sure stuff is spelled right, that it's got the right case, that it's a good case. We do that all along. Don't stop doing it just because you're using a new tool.
So one thing I was thinking is, and I think you answered it with your legal assistant, but like, you might be awesome at all of this, but are you making sure that your team is thinking like you?
Okay,
and staying upskilled?
Yeah, that's a great comment. So I would say this about, that's where I sort of get more cautionary. All right. And so I have not just, and probably about 2 years ago when I started looking at it, I started out having staff try it. And then I didn't just let them use it, but I had staff try it, and they sent me what they drafted. And it seemed like that it was very lawyerish. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was, and it made me very uncomfortable. All right. So I will say, while I use it, and I would say that I know of, I do not encourage at this moment my staff to use it. All right. Now, the reason why is probably just because I haven't formulated that training program to put them through it yet. But here's the reason why that I think it's important to have those terms of use, terms of service for your staff, is because whether I know it or not, as the tool grows, people will use it, whether I know they're using it or not. All right. And so I think it's important for firms, even myself, as far as where I'm going is to create a more comprehensive training program for my staff so they can start using it. But I'm about 24 months in, and I just haven't been at the level for the product that I've seen. Well, I personally have been real comfortable just turning it over to staff and saying, doing this. And I would say it wouldn't be like I'd be turning it over to them anyway, because the people who are working close to me, I read and sign everything. They don't just send out stuff on their own.
Yeah.
Or I'm copied on their email, so I see it. But for a firm-wide deal, I think it's important to have training, just as if it's really important to train people on things like cybersecurity and that, which we should be doing too, because things like ransomware and phishing attacks and people opening and clicking on emails. There's some big money being made out there on training lawyer staffs right now in this area.
Yeah. Well, one thing, and I could see your caution. I think though that it's probably just we have to all get ourselves closer to training and upskilling our staff, if and just putting those like guardrails on, double checking the work and everything, because it could save a ton of people a ton of time. And I started teaching it to my executive assistant and my marketing team back like a couple years ago, and then started moving into legal. But I agree with you. And there's so many new programs out there, and you can have like a little closed universe. And you're right, AI is like attached to everything at this point. Well, why don't we segue to you primary practice is family law. And you said you have a flat fee component to it, which we've had another guest who did flat fee in family law, but that's sort of a rarity, if you will, sometimes, right?
Right.
In some cases. So, like, how do you tell us a little bit about like how you were able to organize your fee structure and your operations that you were able to get a flat fee firm?
Yeah. So this started back in 2008, but so like really, if you remember 2008, the Great Recession and all. And so in 2008, we sort of realized that, economic times what they were, that, a lot of people, if you look at the underserved market for lawyers on consumer-based practices, it's pretty huge. And so, so I just said, I want to start a flat fee program. And so I had a website, basically nofrillstexasdivorce.com. And in that, we just came up with a flat fee model on pricing for different family law areas, from no kids to lawyer just drafting to lawyer representation in court. And we just did a pricing model on all of it, came up with dollar amounts. It doesn't include the filing fee and cost, but have been doing that in some form ever since 2008. And, I will say, people are like, have you ever had any problems with it? Honestly, since 2008, we have not. And I will say that people say, well, how does it work? And I would say, really, it's our contract, because our contract that people sign, it's very detailed as far as what they get for those services. There are some a la carte features of it too. Like if someone were to need deeds filed or they need a quadro done, we've assigned pricing on that, because every case doesn't need those things, especially on the small end. And so we sort of built that in, and then we make the determination if it's a flat fee model. Some of those agreements have it, it has to all be agreed. And so if people start, in family law, people are like, well, how do you know it's going to be a flat fee? How do you know that people, are going to always be agreeable? Because, for doing family law, as long as I've had and have been doing it, that, everybody comes in and says their case is agreed. Everyone comes in and says everything's worked out. And then basically you start digging into it and you realize nothing's worked out. This is some 50,000 foot view that people are thinking of. And so you offer it to people where they're agreed. And then if it becomes contested, it flips to an hourly model. And so that's in our agreement. We tell everybody up front. And we've had, a fair amount of those cases that started out as pretty simple cases that got flipped to an hourly basis. Again, if you say, why do I think it works? I think it's the expectations that are created at that initial meeting and the agreement that the client signs, so everybody knows exactly what the rules are.
And I think that's great because one of the big takeaways in all of this AI talk is just like the future death of the billable hour, and I think that we're going to see that that changing in the future. And so I think those who found ways to make litigation or just any legal space more flat fee, they're on the right path because they've sort of built in their expectations and figured out what to charge for the services that they're providing. Okay, so what we generally ask all of our guests is, what's your favorite board game or game? So do you have one that you could think of?
I would just say on that one that my favorite game is the practice of law. So, so my favorite game is the practice of law.
No one said that one before. That's a first.
Yeah, I'd probably say the practice of law is my favorite game. I love it. I do it every day. And so that would be my favorite game.
Okay. If it wasn't the practice of law, what would your favorite game be?
Oh my God, probably diplomacy, but that takes me back.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of that game before, but it sounds fun. So I'm going to keep a tab of all of that. We've had a handful of Monopoly people, but we never had diplomacy. I don't think we've had a Risk. Maybe we have, but I don't know.
It's kind of like Risk.
It's kind of like that. Okay. All right. So the next question is, what would you consider your superpower and why?
Well, as you can see behind me, I love reading, I love new ideas. So I'd probably say just reading and the constant hunt for new ideas.
Awesome. And what you write for the Texas Bar Journal and the ABA Law Practice magazine and probably other publications. So I think that comes with reading, it's writing and sharing ideas and just being at these places. Like you are also on the law practice. Is it the committee or was the section? I don't know.
Yeah,
for the state bar.
Yeah. So I'm on law practice management for the state bar. So LPM for the state bar. Which we've seen each other at too, by the way. And then I also, two other things too, which is I also serve on the Family Law Council for the State Bar of Texas. And then also am one of the co-section reporters with Beth Johnson for the Family Law Section Report, which is sent out to all the family lawyers in the state of Texas. So yeah, kind of crazy. I have to plug one thing too while I'm here if I can. You're like, go ahead. Okay. So we have a huge family law conference in Texas. It's in August. It's August 5th through the 8th. It's in San Antonio. And and this year it's the Advanced Family Law Conference. It is the 50th anniversary of the Advanced Family Law Conference. And so I would, we're going to be talking a little bit about AI at that conference on Tuesday. So if you're interested on that, come to San Antonio, August 5th through the 8th. If you're interested in family law, it's one of the largest family law conferences, might be the largest family law conference, maybe in the world, certainly in the US that I know of. And so if you're interested in family law or practice that in any way, certainly make your way to San Antonio, August 5th to the 8th, because for the 50th. And then I would just say, I'm not sure, when this might air, but if not, you can catch it on replay. And so, or I think they actually do a version of the course in Padre, maybe. So there's lots of opportunities if this airs later to check out that course. But there's lots of great material in that course as well. And there's normally, for people who are into law practice and law practice management, there's normally a track on law practice management as it specifically relates to family law and technology. So there's some of that here too.
Oh, well. That's awesome. Well, we'll get this sped up so that people can hear it beforehand. So Patrick, how can people find you? And well, first of all, what's your biggest takeaway you think, like concluding thought about either AI, tech, having had your firm for 20 plus years, family law? Like, what are some of your big takeaways that you think you would like to share with our audience?
Wow, I don't know if I want to answer this, but
pass.
Pass my answer. I think this. I am. I'm very interested in how the remote work factor it will kind of wash out
Mm,
There was a time where I was one of those people who thought everybody needed to be in the office. And
mhm,
then now we're sort of seeing how does that work from a practice management? How do I manage a diverse workforce? Do I let my people come in? Which day are they coming in? How do I
mhm.
know if they're working when they're out, not in the office or whatnot? And then if you just look at, sort of it, not from the employer or firm owner standpoint, but you look at that from the employee standpoint, a lot of employees have the expectation now because of COVID. Well, I worked just fine from home. Everything was okay. Why do you want me to come back in the office now? And so I think I think that going forward is going to be interesting to watch. And then I'll tell you another thing, which I've been sort of trying to figure out, which is, I wonder with COVID, how it's affected people's focus. All right. So
Mm,
one of my other studies is attention to detail, focus from an employee standpoint on what you're doing every day, because I'm seeing that it seems like that whether it is a result of COVID or whether it's a result of technology, and the sort of rapid advancement of cell phones and always being
yeah.
distracted, it just seems like that is an area ripe for discussion, on how do you get your staff to give really full attentive work to what they're doing, and make sure that they're concentrating on it. Now, I see that with my staff. I see it with other people's staffs. I see it with courts and coordinators. I'm seeing it just about every aspect of what's practiced. Maybe it's because, I'm looking at it, but it just seems like you know, that area of attention to detail and focus, you know, um, um, it's sort of in society, and you can look at it from people driving too, by the way. If you've been driving around, how many people are running red lights, looking at their phones and everything. I mean, it's really manifesting itself in a lot of different areas. And so I think, how do we get our teams to focus? How do we get our teams to give really constructive work? And I'm not talking about on the weekends or on Saturdays. I'm talking about during the workday. And so, I think those are probably two areas that, other than just the garden variety, you know, how am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing on a day-to-day basis? Those are two areas that I sort of find interesting that I'm looking in.
I love that point because I'm seeing that as well. And I also saw an article recently about how whether or not people have their video on, how engaged they are, and how like we're making our team, internet provide accessible to have their video on, especially depending on where they're located at the time or what's going on. But just no, I agree. Like, and I like the book Deep Work, where he talks about really you do multiple things, you're really just switch tasking and you're really just doing everything worse basically. But we put a big premium on multitasking. I mean, I'm bad at it. And then also I was just thinking about this other article book. I told myself I couldn't read more books until I finished writing my book, but one that's on my queue is The Anxious Generation, and came out this year
Yeah, I have
by
it.
Ethan. Okay. Yeah, and it talks about how like the phone-based childhood and instead of the play-based childhood, and I think this is all a part of it, but it got worse with the pandemic when like I have an 11 and a 13-year-old, and my kids, 4 years ago had to be on devices by virtue of that was their social outlet, that was their educational outlet, and what have you. No, I agree, and I think it's going to take a lot of conscious work to be able to reverse that impact, and uh probably haven't seen the fullest extent of that. And I think it, like, even when my son, he'll play video games and he's running a YouTube in the back or something, and I'm like, what, why,
Yeah, yeah, it's pretty amazing if you pick up Anxious Generation, which I think it's still on New York Times bestseller list right now. If you look at that book and you look at some of the data on everything from kids, ER admissions,
mm,
hospitalizations, all this like sort of emergency room data, it's really crazy to look at that and see, sort of how technology has, affected kids. I have two kids. They're adults now, and two girls, and they are 21 and 20, soon to be 22. And I've talked to them about how technology has affected them and their lives with social media and, any type of social platform, be it, TikTok or Instagram or those type of things. And they say, Dad, you don't understand. And, I have to say this, I try, but, I was a generation where we had no cell phones.
Yeah.
Our parents said, have a good time. Let me know where you are. Come back, before the light turns on. I was like thinking about that. Like, think about it. All you had was your watch. That was a big thing, is that you knew when you had to be back. So you just looked at your watch. There was no connectivity, no tracking, right?
That's true.
I sound like I'm 100 years old, but I'm just like saying it's a different world. And I think
Yeah.
for those of us, you and I, we want to participate in it. So we just got to know what this technology is. Now I have to ask you this: when is your book coming out?
Okay. Well, and I did not ask you to ask me that, but at this rate, you did at this rate. I think it's going to be early to mid-August. I am at this recording. I am finishing up the edits, and they're quite pleasant. I'm very impressed. Actually, I don't see a lot of need to edit too much afterwards. So it's coming out early. What?
Do you have a title?
Yeah, it's called Power Up Your Practice, and I haven't finalized the subtitle yet. I'll shoot you an email of what I'm aiming for. Get your feedback. But yeah, we're putting up the finishing touches, finalizing the cover and the back cover and all that. So it's going to be the same name as the podcast, and it's coming out in early to mid-August, in time for my fall semester and a lot of conferences I'll be going to. So I'm really excited.
Well, I'm excited for you. And I heard your speech at the State Bar annual meeting. And so, I can tell you from the contents of that speech, I actually made a note when I was sitting there listening to you, buy your book. So, so everyone needs to buy your book. And so, but yeah, so if it's half as good as your speech, it'll be great. So really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Patrick. And that was not a purpose. I didn't pay you anything for that plug. So
you did not. No.
How can people find you? And I know that you and I need to talk more, because I'm excited about all the reading you do. And I like finding people who like to read as much as I do, and sharing ideas. But how can people find you? And thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, yeah. No, thank you very much for having me. I love the topic, love the material. And, I always say this to everybody in almost every speech. If you're a practice owner or you're wondering about technology or how to do it or have a question, just reach out to me. So our website is thewrightlawyers.com. It's THEWRIGHT lawyers.com. And you can reach me via email at Patrick, PATRICK, at thewrightlawyers.com. I will say that I was laughing the other day, because if you go on Avo, you can find that someone gave me a review, but they spelled my name WRITE. So it's WRIGHT. And so I would say that if you have any questions, AI practice, involvement, things to even maybe things not to do. So I would say this too, which is, if you are a law practice owner and you've had a firm for any length of time, we can all tell you horror stories of screw ups or things we wish we didn't do, or maybe a vendor we held on to for too long. And so, I would just say, some of those things which we would tell people not to do are as important as what we tell people to do. So I'm available. Reach out to me and I'll try to help.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Thanks everyone for joining us on this insightful journey today. We had a lot of great talk about AI, flat fee for a traditional hourly concept area of practice, and just like how to use AI, and a lot of different programming from conferences and books, and just also that attention that we're starting to see, that change and that shift in this and in the last handful of years and generation as well. So your time and engagement means the world to us. If you've enjoyed this episode, definitely continue the conversation by connecting with us on the Power Up Your Practice Facebook group. Add yourself to our newsletter. You can find us more at powerupyourpractice.com, and we will have the book out in, let's just say, mid-August at this point, but really excited to share that information. So we'll see you next time. Feeling overwhelmed by admin tasks? You're not alone. Many immigration lawyers are in the same boat. That's where Staffy comes in. Over 90 law firm owners just like you have turned to Staffy for help with legal, administrative, marketing, and client-facing work. Now, Staffy's mission to help lawyers find balance while growing their firm. With bilingual virtual staff and full HR support, they take the hassle out of a team management and focus on what matters most, your clients and your practice. I've personally benefited from Staffy's support with 7 virtual assistants of my own across various areas of 2 of my businesses, including my law firm. Now, schedule a free initial consultation with Staffy. That's stafi.cc and use the code RUBY. That's RUBY for $500 off. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. Join us next week for another episode where we'll continue to explore insightful strategies for success. Power Up Your Practice with us. See you next time.